I want to tell you something before I begin. Something I need you to understand before you hear a single word of what happened to me on the night of March 4th. I am not a religious man. I was not a religious man. I spent 31 years of my life building the most sophisticated defense system a human being can construct. Not with weapons, not with walls, but with knowledge, with credentials, with the cold, clean logic of science. And I was very, very good at it. My name doesn't matter. But what I did matters enormously, because it's the reason Jesus chose to say what he said to me. I was a cardiothoracic surgeon, 31 years, 1,200 open-heart surgeries, a faculty position at one of the most prestigious teaching hospitals in the country. My colleagues call me a miracle worker. The press call me a pioneer. I call myself a realist. I saved over 3,000 hearts in my career. I just couldn't save my own. I grew up in a church-going home in rural Ohio. Hymns every Sunday. Grace before every dinner. A mother who read psalms aloud before bed like they were lullabies. I loved her. God, I love that woman. But when I was 17 years old, my younger brother Marcus was diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. He was 11. He had my mother's eyes and my father's laugh, and absolutely no idea what was about to happen to him. We prayed. My mother knelt on that kitchen linoleum floor every single morning for 2 years and begged God to heal her boy. The entire church prayed. We fasted. We believed. We did everything you're supposed to do when you trust in a God who performs miracles. Marcus died on a Tuesday in October. He weighed 61 pounds. I stood at his grave in the cold Ohio wind, and I made a decision that would hollow me out for the next 35 years. If there is a God and he watched Marcus die, then I want nothing to do with him. And if there is no God, which was far easier to believe, then every prayer my mother ever prayed was nothing but molecules vibrating in an empty universe. Either way, I was done. I buried my faith in the ground next to my brother, and I walked away. What I built in its place was impressive by any measure. Johns Hopkins undergraduate, Harvard Medical School, a residency that my program director still calls generational. I understood the human heart better than almost anyone alive. Its architecture, its failures, its electrical rhythms, the precise millisecond when it surrenders. I could hold a dying heart in my hands and restart it. But I had decided, very deliberately, that the heart was only muscle, ventricles and valves, tissue and electricity. Nothing more. There was no soul. There was no eternity. There was only biology. And when the biology stopped, there was nothing. Silence. A flat line. The end. I told this to my residents. I told it to my students. I told it. God forgive me to dying patients who reach for my hand and ask me if I thought there was something on the other side. I would squeeze their hand gently and say, focus on recovery. Focus on right now. I never lied directly. I just made sure they knew that a man with my education wasn't going to validate superstition. I told it to my wife, Elena, until she stopped bringing God into our home at all. I told it to my daughter, Sophie, who had to hide her Bible in her backpack like it was contraband. I told it to my colleagues at conferences with peer-reviewed certainty and a practiced smile. 3,000 hearts. And every single one of them I treated as nothing more than a mechanical pump. March 4th, 11:22 p.m. I was still in the hospital. I was almost always still in the hospital, finishing notes on a post-operative patient in the cardiac ICU. I remember the exact moment my pen stopped moving. A pressure in my chest. Not sharp, not dramatic, not the Hollywood version. Just pressure, like someone had placed a hand flat against my sternum and was leaning in. I recognized it immediately. I was a heart surgeon. I knew exactly what it was. And then the irony of 31 years of my career collapsed into a single, devastating second because a man who had restarted 3,000 hearts felt his own heart betray him. I tried to reach the call button. I made it approximately 4 steps before my legs stopped working. I went down hard against the linoleum floor, and the last thing I saw as a man who didn't believe in God was the fluorescent light on the ceiling of the cardiac ICU flickering once, twice, and going dark. My heart stopped at 11:24 p.m. I was clinically dead, and then And this is where I need you to lean in close. I was still aware. I was still there. Still me. More me than I had ever been in 52 years of living. And then I saw it. The tunnel. And I knew my life on earth was over. Bowie want you to understand something about dying that nobody tells you. It doesn't hurt. Not the way you imagine. Not the way I imagined. And I had thought about death more clinically than most human beings ever will. I had caused people die on my table, technically, intentionally, during bypass surgery, stopping the heart on purpose, trusting the machine to keep the blood moving while I worked. I understood the physiology of dying better than almost any person alive. But nothing in 31 years of medical training prepared me for what dying actually felt like. The pain in my chest vanished the instant my heart stopped. Not faded, vanished, like a switch had been thrown. One moment I was collapsing against the cold linoleum floor of the cardiac ICU, and the next moment I was weightless, not metaphorically weightless, not a great burden lifted, weightless. I mean the physical sensation of gravity releasing me, completely, instantly, like a hand that had been pressing down on me for 52 years, simply opened, and I rose. I didn't choose to rise. I didn't float dramatically like a soap bubble. It was more like a correction, like my true position had always been up here, and the body on the floor was the aberration. I found myself looking down from approximately 9 feet above the ground, and what I saw stopped every thought in my mind. There was a man on the floor. He was wearing my watch, my wedding ring, my white coat with a small ink stain on the left breast pocket from the Sharpie I'd forgotten to cap that morning. His face was pressed sideways against the linoleum, eyes half open, one arm extended toward the nurse's station call button he had never reached. It took me 4 full seconds to understand that I was looking at myself, and then everything accelerated. The cardiac monitor above bed 7 began its alarm, a sound I had heard 10,000 times, a sound that meant code blue, a sound that I had always heard from the inside of a crisis. Now I heard it from above, and I watched, fully conscious, fully aware, my mind operated with a crystalline clarity I had never experienced in life. As the night team responded, Nurse Rachel Dominguez came through the double doors first. I know her name because I verified it later. She was wearing scrubs with a small cartoon stethoscope pattern, and she had a coffee thermos in her left hand that she set down on the counter. I saw the thermos. Dark green, silver lid, a small dent near the base. She saw my body and shouted, "Dr. Carter is down! I need a crash cart at the nurse's station, now." I watched from the ceiling as 3 more people flooded the room. Dr. Mir Patel, my colleague, my peer, a man I had eaten lunch with hundreds of times, dropped to his knees beside my body and pressed 2 fingers against my neck. I watched his face change. That particular expression, I recognized it. I had worn it myself. It's the face a physician makes when they confirm what they already feared. He looked up at Rachel and said, "No pulse. Start compressions." I watched Rachel Dominguez lock her hands against my sternum, and begin driving down with her full body weight. 30 compressions. 2 breaths. I watched my own chest rise and fall mechanically, artificially, like a bellows being worked by a stranger. I felt nothing. Not detachment. Not horror. I felt curious, as if I were watching a procedure I had performed myself, analyzing the technique from a clinical remove. And here's where I need you to pay attention, because this is where the skeptics always push back. From my position near the ceiling, I could see things no unconscious man on the floor could have seen. Above the crash cart, there was a ceiling tile in the corner of the room. Tile C7, I later confirmed with facilities management, with a water stain in the upper left corner. The stain was shaped roughly like the state of Michigan. I described it to the hospital administrator 3 days after I woke up. She went pale. I watched Dr. Patel instruct the charge nurse to pull my chart from the system. I heard him say, "Exactly, I've verified this. Get me his surgical history, and someone call cardiology, and somebody needs to call his family." I heard the charge nurse, a man named David Okonkwo, respond. "His emergency contact is Elena Carter, wife." I heard my wife's name spoken over my dead body. And something inside me, something that had nothing to do with brain chemistry or oxygen levels, broke. Because in that moment I realized I had never told Elena I loved her enough. I had never told Sophie that her faith wasn't something to be ashamed of. I had 3,000 patients whose hearts I had restarted. And the two people whose hearts I had broken the most were about to get a phone call that their husband and father was gone. They shocked me at 11:31 p.m. 200 joules. I watched my body convulse from above. They shocked me again at 11:33 p.m. 300 joules. I was still watching. Still there. The EEG, I would later be told, showed a completely flat line for the entirety of those minutes. Zero brain activity. Medically, neurologically, I did not exist, and yet I was the most awake I had ever been in my life. The third shock came at 11:35 p.m. 360 joules, maximum output. I watched Dr. Patel's jaw tighten. I watched Rachel Dominguez close her eyes for just a half second. The way people do when they're bracing for bad news they already know is coming. And then the pull began. I can't describe it as anything other than gravitational, but directed not downward, not upward, but inward, like the universe itself had a drain, and I was moving toward it. It wasn't violent. It wasn't frightening, not yet. It was simply inevitable. The way a river doesn't argue with the sea, that I looked at my body one last time. 11 minutes without a heartbeat. 11 minutes without oxygen reaching my brain. By every medical metric I had spent my career mastering, the man on that floor was gone. But I was moving faster now. Faster than thought. Faster than light. The hospital fell away beneath me. The ceiling. The roof. The night sky, gone in an instant. And then the pull became irresistible. I was moving fast towards something I couldn't see. Toward eternity. My journey had just begun. I need to stop here for a moment. Before I describe what came next, I need you to understand something about the word tunnel. Because when most people hear that word in the context of a near-death experience, they picture something small, something claustrophobic, a tube, a passageway, maybe a warm light at the end, soft and inviting, like a hallway in a comfortable house. What I entered was nothing like that. It was more like being inside the space between stars. Imagine standing at the edge of the universe, not looking at it from outside, but inside it, surrounded by it, held by it, and the darkness around you isn't empty. It's alive. It breathes. It has weight and texture, and a kind of intelligence that makes the air in your lungs feel like proof of something. That's the closest I can come in English. And English, I'm about to tell you, is a tragically inadequate language for what I experienced. The movement was instantaneous and eternal simultaneously. I know that makes no logical sense. I was a scientist. I built my entire identity on logical sense. But time stopped behaving the way I had always understood it to behave. I wasn't traveling through seconds. I was traveling outside them. The way a fish lifted from water suddenly becomes aware that water was never the whole world. And then the first memory hit me, not gently, like a wave breaking over concrete. I was 7 years old, standing in my parents' kitchen in Dayton, Ohio. My mother was at the stove, and Marcus, who was only 3, who had my mother's eyes even then, was sitting on the floor trying to build a tower out of wooden blocks. I walked past him and kicked the tower over. Not accidentally. I looked at him, and I kicked it. He burst into tears, and I walked away without a word. It was nothing. A 7-year-old being cruel the way 7-year-olds sometimes are. I had not thought about that moment in 45 years. But in the tunnel, I didn't just remember it. I felt it from Marcus's side. I felt the precise quality of his confusion and hurt, not just that his tower fell, but the bewilderment of being hurt by the person who was supposed to love you most. I felt it in my chest like a splinter being removed after decades of festering. And it passed. And another came. I was 26. First year of residency. A patient, elderly man, 73, admitted for a cardiac consult, reached out and grabbed my hand as I was reviewing his chart. He said, "Doctor, I'm scared. Can we pray together?" I looked at the chart. I looked at him. I said, "Mr. Hendricks, the best thing I can do for you right now is focus on your treatment plan." I patted his hand. clinical, efficient, and I walked out. In the tunnel, I felt what Mr. Hendricks felt in that moment, the loneliness of it. He was 73 years old, and he was afraid of dying, and he reached for a human being and got a treatment plan instead. I felt the specific weight of that rejection, how small it made him feel, how utterly alone. I learned later, in a way I cannot fully explain, that Mr. Hendricks died 4 days after that encounter. He died alone at 3 a.m. because his family lived in another state, and the last living person he had asked for comfort had handed him a brochure about anticoagulation therapy. I wept in the tunnel. I wept without eyes, without tear ducts, without a physical body, and somehow it was the most genuine weeping I had ever done. The memories kept coming, not all of them painful. Some were aching in a different way. Beautiful moments I had been present for, but never truly inhabited. Sophie's first steps, and I was watching with one, while scrolling through surgical notes on my phone. Elena, on our 10th anniversary, reaching across a restaurant table to take my hand, saying, "I just want you back. I just want my husband back." And me squeezing her hand absently, saying, "I'm right here, Elle," but I wasn't. I hadn't been right there in years. The tunnel showed me the architecture of a wasted interior life with the ruthless precision of a diagnostician, and I was both the doctor and the patient. And the diagnosis was devastating. Then came a moment I had almost entirely forgotten. I was 44, a patient, a young woman, 31 years old, post-operative day 2, following a valve repair, knocked quietly on my office door. She was still in her hospital gown, for still in her arm. She said she wanted to thank me. And then she said something that made me uncomfortable. "Dr. Carter, I prayed for you last night. I prayed that God would show you he's real." I remember my exact response. I smiled, the practiced, clinical, slightly condescending smile I had perfected, and I said, "That's very kind. You should get back to bed. You need rest." In the tunnel, I felt what she felt in that moment. She had gathered every ounce of her post-surgical courage to share something sacred with me, and I had folded it into the shape of a dismissal and handed it back to her. Her name was Doctor. I won't give her full name, but I know it. I tracked her down after I returned. She was the first person I called. The tunnel was changing. The darkness around me was no longer simply dark. It was becoming warm at its edges, not warm like temperature, warm like intention. Like something ahead of me was aware of me in the way a parent is aware of a child coming home from far away. There was a quality to it that I can only describe as recognition, as if whatever was at the end of this passage had been expecting me, not with judgment, not with indifference, with longing. And then, underneath everything, beneath the memories and the grief and the weightless rushing, I heard something, not a sound exactly, more like a frequency, a note that the universe was humming at its foundation, a note I had never been able to hear while I was alive because the noise of my own certainty was always too loud. It sounded, God help me, like a name, my name, and something in the deepest part of whatever I still was, not my brain, not my training, not my credentials or my publications or my 31 years' expertise. Something ancient and undeniable in me recognized a voice that was speaking it. I was moving faster now. The warmth ahead was becoming light. Not blinding, not yet, but present. The way dawn is present before the sun clears the horizon, painting the sky a color you can't name but immediately trust. The tunnel was ending, and the light was not waiting passively. The light was reaching for me, and then the tunnel opened, and what I saw shattered everything I thought I knew about reality. I have performed over 1,200 open-heart surgeries. I have held a beating human heart in my bare hands. I have repaired the mitral valve, the aortic valve, the tricuspid. I have grafted arteries the width of a drinking straw onto a heart the size of a fist, working under magnification, in silence, with the kind of focused precision that leaves no room for wonder. I have done this more than 1,200 times. And in all of that, in all those years of intimate contact with the most miraculous organ in the human body, I never once felt what I felt in the first 3 seconds of arriving in heaven, because in those 3 seconds, every single thing I thought I understood about the word beautiful was gently, irrevocably, and permanently retired. The light came first, not the way sunlight comes, not arriving from a direction, not casting shadows, not diminishing with distance. This light emanated. It came from everywhere and everything simultaneously, from the ground, from the air, from objects, from space itself, as if light wasn't something that traveled here, but something that lived here, as if darkness had never existed in this place, and the very concept of shadow was a foreign language that no one spoke. And the color, I need you to stop here with me, because this is a moment where human language becomes genuinely, structurally inadequate. And I say that as a man who has published 47 peer-reviewed papers and who chose his words with surgical precision for 3 decades. There is no color in your visual experience, no color in any human painting, any photograph, any screen you've ever looked at, that corresponds to what I saw. I'm not saying the colors were brighter. Brightness is a quantity, more or less of something that already exists. What I saw were colors that do not exist on the electromagnetic spectrum. Colors my earthly eyes had never been equipped to process, and yet somehow, I processed them completely. New colors, colors with no names, colors that, when I looked at them, produced emotions I had never felt before, emotions that also have no names, emotions that existed somewhere between overwhelming gratitude and finally arriving home after a journey so long you forgot you were traveling. The sky, if you could call it sky, was layered in these impossible colors, moving slowly like the surface of deep water, and it produced in my chest a physical sensation of expansion, like my capacity for feeling was being stretched beyond what a human rib cage was designed to contain. And then I looked down. The ground beneath me was grass. That is the only word I have. But the grass, I need you to understand what this grass was. It wasn't simply growing. It was alive in a way that went beyond biology, beyond photosynthesis, beyond cellular respiration, all the mechanisms I had spent my life reducing living things to. Each blade shimmered with an inner luminescence, a soft gold-green light that pulsed rhythmically, and as I stood there I realized with shock that moved to me like electricity. It was worshiping. The grass was worshiping, not metaphorically, not poetically. Each blade was producing a frequency, a sound so low and so pure it was felt more than heard, and together, the entire field of it was harmonizing. The trees at the edge of what I could see were harmonizing with the grass. The river, I could see a river, crystal and slow and impossibly clear, was harmonizing with the trees. The very air was part of the chord. The entire landscape was a single, continuous, living act of worship, and it had been happening since before I arrived and will continue long after, and my presence in it was not an intrusion, but an invitation. I knelt, not because I decided to kneel, but because my knees simply understood something my mind was still catching up to, and I pressed my hand into the grass. It was softer than anything I have ever touched, softer than surgical silk, softer than my daughter's hair when she was born, and when my hand made contact, the frequency changed just slightly, as if the grass acknowledged me, as if it said, in the only language it knew, "Welcome, we've been waiting." I wept, again, still without a body, and yet completely, fully, undeniably. The air. How do I tell you about the air? You know how sometimes, rarely, on a perfect spring morning, you step outside and the air is so clean and the temperature is so exactly right that for just a moment, breathing feels like a gift? Take that moment, multiply it by everything, and then understand that what I'm describing still doesn't reach it. The air in heaven tasted like joy. I know that sounds unhinged. I know how it sounds to a rational mind. I was a rational mind, the most aggressively rational mind I knew. But I am telling you with the full weight of my medical training, my scientific worldview, my 52 years of empirical living. The air tasted like joy, like the precise molecular compound of every good thing that had ever happened to you, distilled into a single breath. I inhaled once. And 35 years of grief over Marcus, 35 years of 17-year-old boy's rage at a God he decided didn't exist, began slowly to loosen, not disappear. Loosen, like a fist that has been clenched for so long I forgot it was a fist, beginning, finger by finger, to open. And then I heard the music. I have always loved music in the careful, analytical way I love most things, appreciating its mathematical structure, its emotional leverage, its neurological effects. I had read the studies on music and the brain. I understood why music moved people. I had, in my more honest moments, envied people who were moved by it rather than simply understanding the mechanism of being moved. What I heard in heaven did not move me. It remade me. It was voices, thousands of them, tens of thousands, maybe more. I cannot give you a number because the number kept expanding as I listened, as if the choir grew every time I thought I'd found its edges, and they were singing in a language I had never heard and yet understood with perfect, immediate fluency, the way you understand your own name in any language. And what they were singing was not a song exactly. It was more like a declaration, a statement of fact so joyful it had become melody, over and over and over. Not repetitive the way monotony is repetitive, but repetitive the way a heartbeat is repetitive, necessary, sustaining, alive. And underneath the voices, underneath all of it, was a single note, one note, so deep and so vast and so fundamental that I understood in my bones that this was a note the universe had been built on, the frequency of I am, the sound of existence itself, being held in place by a voice that had been speaking since before the first atom was formed. I stood in the middle of it, and I was undone, completely, willingly, gratefully undone. And then I saw him. He was standing at the edge of the field, not approaching, not distant, simply present, the way a lighthouse is present, not moving toward the ships, not away, simply being what it is, offering what it has, available to anyone with eyes to look. He was too far away to see clearly, but I could feel him. I could feel him the way you feel fire in a cold room, not touching it, not even close to it, but aware of its heat from across a space, aware that it is the reason the room is no longer unbearable. I felt known, completely known. Every surgical paper I'd published, every dismissive word I'd spoken to a frightened patient, every night I'd work late rather than go home to Elena, every brick and wall I'd built around my heart since Marcus died. He knew all of it, and he was still standing there, still present, still available. A sound began building in my chest, not from the music, not from the air, not from anything external, from something in me that had been silent for 35 years, something that had been waiting, underneath all the credentials and the certainty and the grief, for exactly this moment. He began to walk toward me. And with every step he took, the music grew, the grass brightened, the impossible colors deepened, the air became almost too sweet to breathe. And then he spoke. One word, my name, just my name, spoken in a voice like thunder and like whisper simultaneously, spoken with warmth that made every other time anyone had ever said my name sound like a rough draft. And in that single word, I heard everything. I heard I know you. I have always known you. I have been waiting. I am not angry. I am not disappointed. I am here. I am here. And I love you. All of that in one word, in my name. And everything changed. He walked toward me across that living, worshiping field. And I want to tell you what I saw, because the world is giving you a picture of Jesus that I need to gently, firmly, and lovingly correct. The paintings are wrong. Not maliciously wrong. Not dishonestly wrong, just insufficient. Like try to describe the ocean by showing someone a glass of water. The water is real. It's just not the ocean. He was not pale. He was not soft. He was not the serene, European-featured figure in the Renaissance paintings I had walked past in hospital corridors for 30 years without a second glance. He had Middle Eastern features, strong, weathered, earned, skin that spoke of sun and wind and physical labor. A carpenter's hands, a traveler's face, the face of a man who had walked dusty roads in sandals and slept under open skies and wept at gravesides and been abandoned by friends and tortured by enemies and endured all of it without bitterness. And that last part was visible, visibly absent of bitterness, which, if you understand what he endured, is the most supernatural thing about his face. He was not tall in a dramatic, imposing way. He was simply sufficient. Exactly enough. The way a perfect surgical instrument is exactly enough. No excess, no deficiency. Every dimension precisely what the moment requires. And his eyes. I have to stop here. I have to take a breath. Even now, even telling you this, because his eyes are where language does not just struggle. Language surrenders. They were dark, brown, I think, in the way that the universe is dark, not absence of light, but presence of depth. When he looked at me, I felt, and I mean felt physically, in whatever I was instead of a body, the sensation of being seen entirely, not observed, not assessed, seen, the way you desperately want to be seen your entire life, and never quite are, even by the people who love you most, even in your most honest moments, because no human being has ever had quite enough capacity to see all of you at once. He had that capacity. He used it, all of it, on me, and in his eyes I don't have a better word than I saw time, not like a film reel, not like a sequence, all of it simultaneously. Every version of me, the 7-year-old kicking Marcus's tower, the 17-year-old standing at a grave in Ohio, making a decision that would cost him decades, the 26-year-old resident walking away from a frightened old man who just wanted prey, the surgeon, the husband, the absent father, the man on the linoleum floor. He saw all of them, all of me, all at once, and he was still walking toward me. He stopped 3 feet away. 3 feet. The distance across an operating table. The distance I had stood from 10,000 beating hearts. I noticed his clothing. Simple, white, but white in the way that the impossible colors of heaven were colors. Not more something earthly, but something categorically different. A white that contained every color. A white that was somehow warm. And then he raised his hands. I saw the scars. I am a surgeon. I know wounds. I know the difference between a wound that is healed and a wound that is still present. These were present. Not raw, not bleeding, not painful in appearance, but present, deliberate, chosen. He had healed everything healable and kept these. The nail wounds in his wrists, not his palms, the way the paintings show it, but his wrists, where the anatomy actually supports the weight of a body, were there, undisguised, offered. He held his hands toward me and said, and I am giving you his exact words, the words I have repeated every single day since I returned, the words I will carry to my own grave. Thomas, just my name again, but this time closer, this time with his eyes on mine and his scarred hands extended and the weight of eternity in every syllable. Thomas, you saved 3,000 hearts, but you wouldn't let me near yours. And I broke. I don't mean I cried. I mean I broke. The way a bone breaks, the way a dam breaks, the way something that has been holding against pressure for 35 years finally, completely, structurally gives way. Every argument I had ever made, every peer-reviewed dismissal, every patient I had patted on the hand and redirected away from God, every night I had worked late rather than go home, every time I had looked at Elena's face and chosen distance, every year of silence in the place where Marcus used to be, all of it broke. I fell to my knees on that singing grass, and I said the first honest thing I had said in 35 years. I said, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I didn't let myself know. And he knelt, the king of the universe, the word that spoke galaxies into existence, the being whose voice was the foundation note of all creation. He knelt in front of me on the grass, and he put his scarred hands on either side of my face, and he said, I know, Thomas. I was there, every day, every surgery. Every night you drove home alone at 2 a.m. because you couldn't face the quiet. I was there, and I waited, because I knew this day would come. I felt the weight of the cross in his hands. I don't know how else to say it. When he touched me, I felt not pain, but the knowledge of pain, the weight of what those scars had cost. And simultaneously, in the same instant, I felt the love that had made the cost worth it, not worth it in a transactional sense. Worth in the way that a parent runs into a burning building for their child, not calculating, not weighing options, but of course, there was never any other choice. I would do it again, he said, for you, Thomas, alone. If it had only ever been you, I would have done every moment of it again. That is how much you matter. And then the life review began. I thought I had experienced fragments of it in the tunnel. I was wrong. What happened in the tunnel was a preview. What happened now was a film. Jesus stood beside me, his hand on my shoulder, steady and warm, and the air in front of us became a window, not a screen. A window, as if we were looking to the fabric of heaven, into the actual moment of my actual life, preserved somewhere in the architecture of eternity with perfect fidelity. He showed me Marcus, not Marcus dying, not the funeral. He showed me something I had not thought about in 40 years. The summer Marcus was 8 and I was 14, and it followed me everywhere that summer, everywhere, with the unself-conscious devotion that little brothers have for older brothers who haven't yet learned to be cruel. And one afternoon I turned him on the porch and said, "Marcus, stop following me. You're embarrassing." He showed me Marcus's face, the precise quality of it, the way the light went out. And then he showed me what I had never known. Marcus, that night in his room, praying, 8 years old, kneeling beside his bed, the way our mother had taught him, saying, "God, please help Thomas love me. I just want my brother to like me." 8 years old, praying for his older brother's love. I cannot tell you what that did to me. Jesus didn't say anything. He just let me feel it. All of it. The full weight of one careless sentence spoken by a 14-year-old boy who had no idea he was bruising something that would carry that bruise into a cancer ward a few years later. Then he showed me something else. He showed me a moment I had completely forgotten. I was 38, a junior resident on my team, a young woman named Dr. Amara Osei, brilliant, first in her class at Columbia, third week of her surgical residency, had made an error during a procedure, a recoverable error, no harm to the patient. But I had stopped the procedure, removed my gloves, and said, in front of the entire surgical team, "Dr. Osei, this is not a classroom. If you cannot perform at this level, I need to know now before someone dies because of you." The window showed me what happened next, what I had never seen. Amara Osei sat in a supply closet on the 4th floor for 20 minutes. She did not cry. She sat very still and she thought, with great seriousness, about whether she should quit, whether medicine was the right path, whether the voice of Thomas Carter, a man she had admired from a distance all through medical school, was actually the voice of truth telling her she didn't belong. She almost quit. She almost quit. And Jesus showed me what I never knew. Amara Osei went on, despite that moment, through that moment, to become a pediatric cardiac surgeon. She has saved over 400 children's lives. 400 children are alive today because Amara Osei chose to stay in that supply closet and decide that my voice was not the final word on her worth. But then Jesus showed me something else. The children she didn't save. Not because of her. Because of the 2 years she spent working at half capacity, afraid to trust her instincts, afraid to innovate, afraid to be wrong again. Because a senior surgeon had used his authority not to build her up, but to diminish her. 2 years of diminishment. He showed me the faces. I cannot give you that number. I'm not able to give you that number. But I carry it. Jesus said, quietly, not with condemnation, with grief, "Thomas, I gave you authority to build, and sometimes you use it to subtract." Then he showed me Elena, our wedding day. Elena's face when she said her vows. And I saw it now, really saw it, the way I had never seen it when I was standing 3 feet away from her that day. She was not just marrying me. She was trusting me with the most vulnerable version of herself. She was handing me something she had been carrying alone her whole life. Her love, her hope, her future, and she was putting it in my hands. And Jesus showed me, year by year, what I had done with it. Not cruelty, not abuse. Something almost worse in its ordinariness. Absence. Present in the house, but not in the room. Physically there, but fundamentally elsewhere. And Elena, he showed me Elena, alone in our kitchen at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday while I was at the hospital, sitting at the table with a cup of tea that had gone cold, not crying, just sitting in the posture of a woman who has slowly, quietly accepted a loneliness she never agreed to. I could not breathe. I mean that literally, whatever breathed in me, stopped. She prayed for you, Jesus said, every night for 11 years after Sophie was born. She knelt beside your side of the bed, and she prayed for you. You slept through it. Every night for 11 years. Thomas, he said, I answered every one of those prayers. Tonight is the answer. He showed me one more thing. He showed me Sophie, 17 years old, hiding her Bible in her backpack. And he showed me what it cost her. not just the inconvenience of hiding something sacred, the theology she had built around it, the unspoken belief, constructed over years of watching her father dismiss the things she held holy, that if the smartest man she knew thought God wasn't real, then maybe he wasn't. And if he wasn't, then who was she praying to? And if no one was listening, then what was the point? Sophie, at 17, was losing her faith. Because of me. And Jesus said, and this is the moment, this is the sentence that ended Thomas Carter, the atheist, and began whoever I am now. He said, Thomas, I didn't bring you here to punish you. I brought you here to show you what love looks like when it's missing, because you are capable of giving it. You have always been capable. You just didn't know where it came from. He paused, and in the pause the music swelled, that vast, impossible choir, and the light around us deepened, and I felt something I had not felt since I was 17 years old, standing beside my mother at a Sunday service in Ohio, singing words I didn't understand but felt to be true. Hope, the wall you built when Marcus died, he said. I was there when you built it. I watched every brick. And I want you to know something, Thomas, something I need you to carry back with you. He took my hands in his scarred hands holding mine, and he looked at me with those galaxy-deep eyes, and he said, Marcus is here. He has been here since the day you buried him. And the first thing he said when he arrived, do you want to know what he said? I couldn't speak. I nodded. He said, tell Thomas the first forgave him for the tower. Tell him I always wanted to be just like him. Tell him to stop being so stubborn and come home. I collapsed. There is no other word. I collapsed into Jesus, into the arms of the being I had spent 35 years denying, and he held me. The king of the universe held a broken, arrogant, grieving, stubborn heart surgeon from Ohio, and he held him the way you hold someone who has been lost for a very long time and has finally found their way back. And he let me stay there. He didn't rush me. He didn't have anywhere else to be. He just held me and let 35 years of clenched fists slowly, completely, permanently open. I don't know how long we stayed like that. Time, as I've told you, doesn't behave the same way there. But eventually he pulled back. He held me at arm's length, those scarred hands on my shoulders, and he looked at me with an expression I have no word for. The closest I can come is this. The expression of someone who has finished a very long, very difficult, very important piece of work, and is looking at it and seeing that it is good. He said, it's not your time, Thomas. I said, and I'm not ashamed to tell you this, I said, please don't send me back. I don't want to leave. He smiled, and the smile of Jesus, added 3 new impossible colors to the heaven sky. I know, he said, that's how I know you're ready. Ready for what? To go back, and to tell them I am. Tell them the wall doesn't have to stand. Tell them Marcus's prayer gets answered. Every Marcus, every person who died before someone chose to love them the way they needed. Tell them I hold them all. Tell them there is still time. Tell them hell is real, and I don't want them there. Tell them heaven is real, and I built it for them. Tell them the scars are real, and they were worth it. Tell them. He stepped back. The light began to intensify around me. Not threatening, not painful, but conclusive. The way a door looks when it's closing, not slamming, but simply, gently, completing its arc. Tell them I'm coming back, Thomas. Tell them to be ready. Tell them I love them. Every atheist who thinks they're too smart for me, every Muslim who honors me as a prophet, but hasn't met me as a savior, every Buddhist seeking peace in the wrong direction, every lukewarm believer who knows my name but not my face. Tell them I love them, and tell them there's still time. He looked at me one last time, and he said, go back, and tell them I am. Tell them I'm coming. Tell them there's still time. And then light, blinding light, and I was back. Pain, that was the first thing. Not the transcendent, impossible beauty of heaven. Not the warmth of scarred hands holding mine. Not the music of 10,000 voices harmonizing with singing grass and crystal rivers. Not the galaxy-deep eyes of the being who had just held me while 35 years of grief finally, completely released. Pain, raw, blunt, physical pain, the kind that reminds you with savage efficiency exactly what it means to have a body with nerve endings and muscle tissue, and a sternum, that had just been compressed approximately 400 times by the full body weight of a trauma nurse who was very good at her job. My chest felt like someone had parked a car on it. My throat felt like sandpaper wrapped around a scream. My back ached from the linoleum in a way that was so profoundly, aggressively ordinary that it was almost funny. Almost. Because underneath the pain, woven through it, inseparable from it, was something I had never felt in my body before. Not in 52 years of living inside it. Not in 31 years of driving it through 18-hour surgical days on caffeine and stubbornness. Peace. Not the absence of trouble. Not the temporary relief of a problem solved. The kind of peace that is weight. The kind that sits in your chest like something has been installed there that was always supposed to be there and simply wasn't. Like a valve that had been missing from the architecture of my heart. Not the surgical kind, not the mitral or aortic, but something deeper, something structural, something that changed the way the whole system ran. I heard the monitor before I opened my eyes. Beep, 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 steady, rhythmic, mine. The voices came next. He's back. I've got a pulse. Sinus rhythm. I got sinus rhythm. That was Dr. Patel. Amir. I recognized his voice the way you recognize a voice you've eaten lunch with hundreds of times. And I noticed something new in it. Something I had never heard in Amir Patel's voice in all the years I'd known him. Something that sounded like it was located somewhere between professional relief and genuine, unguarded awe. 14 minutes. A different voice, Rachel Dominguez. I would later confirm. 14 minutes, Dr. Patel. 14. A pause. I know. I opened my eyes. The fluorescent light of the cardiac ICU hit me like a physical force. Not because it was bright, but because of what it wasn't. It wasn't the light of heaven. It was a thin, clinical, slightly blue-white light of a hospital at midnight, and it was the most information-dense sensory contrast I have ever experienced, because in 1/2 second of fluorescent light, I understood, in my bones, in my newly restructured chest, exactly what I had left behind, and exactly what I had come back to, and exactly why. Amir Patel's face appeared above me. He had his 2 fingers on my carotid, checking my pulse the old-fashioned way even with the monitor's screaming confirmation beside him. He was still wearing his surgical cap. His eyes were, I want to describe his eyes accurately. His eyes were the eyes of a scientist who has just watched his most fundamental assumptions shatter against observable reality and hasn't yet decided how to process it. He said, Thomas, not Dr. Carter, not the professional courtesy we'd maintained for 11 years of collegial distance. Just my name, the way Jesus had said it. Not with galaxies in his eyes, not with scars on his hands, but with the same essential thing underneath it. I see you. You're real. You're here. I tried to speak. My throat produced something between a gasp and a word. Amir leaned closer. Don't talk. You've been, Thomas, you've been in cardiac arrest for 14 minutes. You need to. Green, I said. He stopped. The coffee stain, I said. My voice was gravel and rust. On the ceiling tile, above the crash cart, upper left corner, shaped like Michigan. The color left Amir Patel's face. Not gradually, immediately, as if someone had reached behind him and turned off a switch. He straightened up slowly. He looked at Rachel Dominguez. She was staring at me with her hand over her mouth, and I noticed her scrubs, the cartoon stethoscope pattern, exactly as I had seen him from 9 feet above the floor while my heart was not beating. How? Rachel started. Your thermos, I said. Dark green, silver lid, dent near the base. You set it on the counter when you came through the doors. She looked at the counter. The thermos was exactly where I had watched her set it. The room was very quiet for a moment. The kind of quiet that happens when intelligent people encounter something their intelligence cannot immediately process. Amir sat down on the edge of the supply cart beside me. He didn't say anything for several seconds. Then he said, carefully, in the voice of a man choosing his words with the precision of someone who knows they are in the presence of something that will require new vocabulary. Your EG was flat, Thomas. From 11:24 to 11:38. 14 minutes. Zero brain activity. There's no mechanism for her. I know, I said. You shouldn't be. I know, Amir. Another silence. Where were you? He asked. And I understood that he wasn't asking medically. He wasn't asking neurologically or physiologically. He was asking the way a human being asks when they're standing at the edge of something vast and have decided, against every instinct of their training, to look over. I looked at my colleague, my peer, my fellow scientist, the man who had compressed my chest 400 times and shocked my body 3 times and refused to stop. And I said, I'll tell you everything. But first, someone needs to call my wife. Elena arrived at 1:17 a.m. I know the exact time because I was watching the clock on the wall when she came through the door, and I want to tell you what I saw when she walked in. Because it matters. Because Jesus had shown me Elena sitting alone at the kitchen table with a cold cup of tea, and now I was seeing her with new eyes. The eyes he had given me, and what I saw broke me open all over again in the best possible way. She was terrified. She was in the coat she grabbed over her pajamas, hair still from sleep, no makeup, completely unguarded. And she was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life, not because of how she looked, because of what I now understood she was. 11 years of prayers beside my side of the bed, 11 years of choosing to stay in a marriage with a man who had given her his schedule instead of his heart, 11 years of not giving up. She crossed the room and took my face in her hands. The same gesture, I realized with shock, that moved to me like electricity, the same gesture that Jesus had used when he knelt in front of me on the singing grass. And she said, Thomas, Thomas, you scared me. You scared me. And I said, for the first time and longer than I can honestly calculate, Elena, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I have to tell you something. I have to tell you everything. She pulled back to look at me. She searched my face, and I watched her see it. Whatever it was that had changed in my eyes, whatever the residue of eternity looks like on a human face, she saw it, and she began to cry. Not afraid crying, not grief crying, recognition crying. The crying of someone who has been waiting for something for a very long time and has just seen it arrive. What happened to you? She whispered. Everything. I said, everything happened. The medical verification began the following morning. Dr. Patricia Walsh, the head of neurology, a woman whose professional skepticism made mine look casual, reviewed my case personally. 14 minutes of clinical death. EEG flat throughout. 3 defibrillation attempts. No heartbeat. No brain activity. No oxygen reaching the cerebral cortex for the full duration. She sat across from me with my chart and she said, with the careful phrasing of someone who has spent 30 years avoiding sentences that can't be peer-reviewed, Dr. Carter, by every metric we have, by everything we understand about cerebral hypoxia, about neurological damage thresholds, about the physiological consequences of 14 minutes without cardiac output, you should not be sitting in front of me having this conversation. You should have significant, likely permanent neurological impairment. She paused. You have none. Your cognitive function is... Frankly, your cognitive function is better than your pre-arrest baseline on every measure we've run. I said, I know. She looked at me for a long moment. She said, do you want to tell me what you think happened? And I told her. I told her about the ceiling tile shaped like Michigan. I told her about Rachel's thermos and the cartoon stethoscope scrubs. I told her what David Okonkwo had said when he pulled my emergency contact. Elena Carter, wife, word for word. I told her that Amir Patel had instructed someone to pull my surgical history, that the third shock had been delivered at 11:35 p.m. at 360 joules, that a janitor had been mopping the hallway outside the ICU with a yellow wet floor sign at approximately 11:29 p.m. She verified every detail, every single one. She sat back in her chair at the end of it and did something I had never seen Patricia Walsh do in 11 years of knowing her. She folded her hands in her lap, and she looked out the window, and she was quiet for a very long time. Then she said, I don't have a framework for this. I know, I said. I didn't either. I spent 31 years building the framework. I know exactly what it can and can't hold. And I'm telling you, Patricia, what happened to me does not fit. Not because the science is wrong, because the science is incomplete. She looked at me. What do I do with that? The same thing I'm doing. I said, start over. I was discharged 4 days later. No neurological damage. No cardiac sequelae beyond what would be expected from the arrest itself. No psychosis. No confabulation. No evidence of the elaborate hallucination that the skeptics would later insist must explain everything I had seen and heard and felt and known. I walked out of that hospital into a February morning. Cold air, gray sky, bare trees, ordinary urban landscape. And I stopped on the sidewalk, and I stood completely still for 60 seconds. Because the air didn't taste like joy. Because there were no impossible colors. Because the concrete wasn't alive and worshiping, and the sky wasn't layered in hues that had no earthly name. Because this world, this thin, fragile, beautiful, temporary world, was not heaven, and I now knew with every cell in my body exactly what the difference felt like. And it didn't make me despair. It made me urgent. Elena took my hand. We stood there together on that sidewalk, this woman who had prayed beside my sleeping body for 11 years, and she held my hand, and I held hers, and for the first time in a very long time, I was actually there, present, in the moment, in my life, in our life. I looked at her and I said, I have a message, and I don't know how to deliver it, but I know I have to spend the rest of my life trying. She squeezed my hand. Then let's go home, she said, and we'll figure it out together. I was alive, but I was no longer the same person who died. I had a mission now, a message, and I would spend the rest of my life telling anyone who would listen. Jesus is real. Heaven is real. Hell is real. And you have a choice. It has been 14 months since I died on the floor of the cardiac ICU at 11:24 p.m. on March 4th. 14 months in the flat line on an EEG told the world that Thomas Carter, heart surgeon, atheist, wall builder, professional dismisser of the eternal, no longer existed. And they were right. He doesn't. The man who walked out of that hospital 4 days later was not a repaired version of the man who walked in. He was not a humbled version, not a chastened version, not a man who'd had a frightening experience and decided to hedge his bets with religion just in case. He was something categorically different, the way water is categorically different from ice. Same molecules, yes, but different state, different behavior, different nature. I want to tell you exactly what that looks like, not in vague, inspirational terms, in specifics, because specifics are what I gave my whole career to: specific measurements, specific outcomes, specific verifiable evidence. And I'm not going to abandon that standard now just because the subject matter has changed from cardiology to eternity. What changed immediately? The morning after I was admitted, less than 12 hours after returning, I asked the nurse on duty for a piece of paper and a pen. She brought me a notepad with the hospital's logo on it, and I sat in that bed with monitors still attached to my chest, and I wrote 2 words at the top of the page: I'm sorry. Then I wrote a list. It took 40 minutes. It covered both sides of 3 pages. Every person I could remember dismissing, diminishing, redirecting away from God, mocking with my silence, failing with my absence, patients, colleagues, students, my wife, my daughter, people whose names I had to look up afterward because I had not considered them important enough to remember. Dr. Mara Osei was at the top of that list. I called her from my hospital room on day 2. She is now the chief of pediatric cardiac surgery at a hospital in Atlanta. When I told her why I was calling, when I told her what Jesus had shown me, the supply closet, the 2 years of diminished confidence, the children, she was silent for so long, I thought the call had dropped. Then she said, Dr. Carter, I have prayed for you every single year since that day in the OR. Every year, I prayed that God would reach you. I had to put the phone against my chest for a moment. When I came back, I said, He did. He finally did. And I need you to know that what I said that day was wrong. Not just unkind. Wrong. You belonged in that OR. You belonged in medicine. And I am so deeply, genuinely sorry. She said, I forgive you. I forgave you years ago. But thank you for saying it. That phone call lasted 2 hours. We prayed together at the end of it. I had not prayed in 35 years. The words felt strange in my mouth. Unpracticed, unprofessional, stripped of the expertise I had behind in every other area of my life. But they felt true. That was the thing. They felt more true than anything I had said in my professional voice for 3 decades. I called my daughter Sophie on day 3. She was away at university. When she answered and heard my voice, she immediately said, "Dad, Mom told me, are you okay? Are you—" "Sophie," I said, "I know about the Bible in your backpack." "Silence. I know you hid it. I know why you hid it. And I need to tell you what I did, making you feel like your faith was something to be ashamed of in our home. That was one of the worst things I've ever done. And Jesus showed me what it cost you. He showed me." She started crying. I started crying. Two people who have been living in the same house for 17 years and somehow never managed to have this conversation, having to cross 300 miles of phone line for days after one of them died. She said, "Dad, I almost stopped believing. I was so close to just letting it go, because if someone as smart as you didn't believe." "I was wrong," I said. "Sophie, I was wrong about the most important thing a person can be wrong about. And I need you to know your faith was never foolish. It was never naive. It was the most accurate thing in our house. I just couldn't see it." She flew home that weekend. We sat at the kitchen table, Elena, Sophie, and me, and for the first time in the history of our family, I bowed my head and I said grace. Not perfectly, not eloquently, not with the polished language of someone who had been doing it their whole life, but with everything I had. Elena cried through the whole prayer. She told me later it was the answer to 11 years of kneeling beside our bed. What changed in the months that followed? 6 weeks after discharge, I resigned my faculty position. My department chair, a man I had known for 20 years, looked at me across his desk and said, with genuine concern, "Thomas, you nearly died. You're processing trauma. Take a sabbatical. Don't make permanent decisions from a temporary emotional state." I said, "David, I respect you, but I've spent 31 years making decisions from a permanent intellectual state that turned out to be wrong. I'll take my chances with the emotional one." I sold the house. Elena's idea. Actually, she said we'd been rattling around in it like two people who had forgotten what they were living for, and she was right. We downsized. Significantly. My colleagues thought I'd had a psychotic break. Some of them still do. I genuinely don't mind. I established a foundation, the Marcus Carter Foundation, named for my brother, focused on bringing chaplaincy and spiritual care resources into cardiac ICUs across the country. Because I spent 31 years making sure God was kept out of my department, and I am now spending whatever years I have left making sure every frightened patient who reaches out for prayer can find a hand that reaches back. In 14 months, the foundation has placed trained chaplains in 11 hospitals. I have spoken at 43 events, churches, universities, medical conferences, a prison, a homeless shelter, 2 addiction recovery centers. I have lost count of the individual conversations, but I have not lost count of one specific number. 61 people. 61 people. In 14 months of telling this story, wherever anyone would let me tell it, have told me that they gave their lives to Jesus after hearing what happened to me on March 4th. 61 people who came in skeptical, or wounded, or empty, or angry, and left with something installed in their chest that I recognized immediately. The same thing that was installed in mine. I want to speak to you now, directly, personally, not as a doctor, not as a public speaker, not as a man with credentials and a foundation, and a story that gets him on platforms. Just as Thomas, the boy who buried his faith in an Ohio grave at 17 and spent 35 years building the most sophisticated, empty life he could manage. I want to speak to you, specifically you, to those who think the way I used to think. You're watching this because something brought you here. Maybe curiosity, maybe a late-night algorithm, maybe someone you love shared it, and you watched it to humor them. Maybe, underneath all the certainty and the logic and the peer-reviewed fortress of your worldview, there's a sound you've been hearing, faint, persistent, underneath everything, that you've been explaining away for years. I know that sound. I heard it for 35 years and called it wishful thinking. I know what you're preparing to say right now. I will say it for you. Brain hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, temporal lobe stimulation, hallucination confabulation, wish fulfillment, confirmation bias. I have a medical degree from Harvard. I know every single one of those terms. I used every single one of them at various points in my career, to dismiss stories exactly like mine. So explain this to me. Scientifically, mechanistically, explain this to me. How did a brain with zero electrical activity, confirmed on EEG, documented in a chart you can request from the hospital, produce a detailed, accurate, verifiable image of a coffee stain on a ceiling tile I had never looked at? How did a man with no heartbeat and no oxygen reaching his cerebral cortex accurately report the exact words spoken by specific staff members in a room he was lying unconscious in? How did he return after 14 minutes, after 3 defibrillations, after the neurologist had already begun mentally drafting the damage assessment, with better cognitive function than before he arrested? I'll wait. I waited 35 years for an answer that satisfied me. No one has ever given me one. And I looked. Believe me, I looked. I'm not asking you to abandon your intellect. Jesus doesn't ask for that. The God who designed the human brain is not threatened by the human brain. I'm asking you to do the one thing that real scientific integrity demands. Follow the evidence where it leads, even when it leads somewhere uncomfortable, even when it leads somewhere that requires you to rebuild that I rebuilt. It's worth it. I promise you, it is worth it. To my Muslim brothers and sisters, I want to speak to you with the respect your faith deserves, because you understand surrender to God in a way that puts many Christians to shame. You understand prayer. You understand reverence. You understand that this life is not the end. I honor that. Jesus honors that. And I need to tell you, with love, with respect, without agenda beyond truth, that the Jesus I met is more than a prophet. I know what you've been taught. I know the theology. But I'm telling you what I experienced. He showed me scars. He said, I died for you. He held me with the hands of someone who had paid a price on my behalf that I could never repay. He is not one prophet among many. He is the one who carries wounds he chose to keep, because he wants you to see them, because he wants you to know what love looks like when it has no limit. He is calling you, right now, through this screen, through this story. He knows your name the way he knew mine, with galaxies in his eyes and a patience that has been waiting longer than you know. You don't have to abandon your reverence for God to meet Jesus. You just have to be willing to let him be more than you were told he was. He is more. I promise you, he is so much more. To those who carry wounds like mine, maybe you didn't lose a brother. Maybe you lost a child, a marriage, a dream that God didn't show up for the way you needed him to. Maybe you prayed and the cancer didn't go away. Maybe you believed and the marriage ended anyway. Maybe you trusted and were devastated, and you made the same decision I made at 17, standing at a grave in the cold, deciding that a God who allowed this was a God you wanted nothing to do with. I understand that decision. I lived inside it for 35 years. But I need to tell you what Jesus told me, what he showed me about Marcus, my brother who died at 61 pounds, while my mother prayed on linoleum, my brother whose death I used as the evidence that God either didn't exist or didn't care. Marcus is there. He is there. He is whole and he is joyful and he is, I have no better word, glowing. And the cancer and the weight and the suffering and the prayers that seem to go unanswered, none of it is the final word. None of it is the whole story. Jesus holds the whole story. And the parts that broke your heart, he was weeping over them too. He has not been indifferent to your pain. He has been present in it. Even when you couldn't feel him, the way he was present in mine, even when I was building walls against him with every brick I could find. Your wound is not evidence that he doesn't care. It is an open door that he's been standing at patiently, without forcing, without manipulating, waiting for you to let him in. Let him in. To those who know his name, but not his face. You go to church. You know the worship songs. You bow your head at grace, and you call yourself a Christian, and you have been doing this your whole life, and somewhere along the way the fire became a habit, and the habit became a routine, and the routine became, if you're honest, and I'm asking you to be honest right now, a performance. Jesus is not looking for your attendance record. He's not counting your tithes or your Bible reading streaks or your correct theological positions. He is looking for the thing he showed me he wanted from me all along, the thing Elena prayed for 11 years, the thing Sophie nearly gave up on, the thing that no amount of professional success could substitute for. Your heart, the real one, the broken one, the one behind performance and the routine and the comfortable Christian life that has somehow become a way of being close to God without ever actually encountering Him. He is real. He is not a historical figure or a theological concept or a moral framework or a cultural tradition. He is present. He is here. He is standing in the field of your life right now, not approaching dramatically, not threatening, just present, the way a lighthouse is present, offering what He has, available to anyone with eyes to look. Look, don't wait until you're on a linoleum floor. Don't wait until your heart stops. Don't wait until the only thing left is a flat line and a crash cart and a colleague who has lost the color in his face. Look now to everyone. I have 14 months of evidence that Jesus is who He says He is. I have a daughter who is no longer hiding her Bible. I have a wife who no longer kneels alone. I have a colleague in Atlanta who told me she'd been praying for me every year for 14 years. I have 61 people who found something real after hearing what happened to me on March 4th. I have a foundation named after my brother who is whole, who is there, who sent me back with a message about a tower made of wooden blocks and 35 years of unnecessary distance. I have a chest full of peace that has no medical explanation, and I have a message, the one He commissioned me to carry, the one I am carrying right now through the screen, to wherever you are, whatever time it is, whatever brought you here tonight. Jesus is real. Heaven is real. Hell is real, and He does not want you there. He has done everything, short of removing your freedom to choose, to make sure you don't have to go there. He is coming back, not as a baby in a manger, not as a wandering teacher, as a king, and it will not be ambiguous, and it will not be deniable, and there will be no more time for decisions. But right now, in this moment, wherever you are, there is still time. The most important thing you will ever do, I'm going to ask you to do something. Not tomorrow, not after you thought about it, researched it, consulted your skepticism, discuss it with someone who will talk you out of it. Now, if you have never given your life to Jesus, or if you gave it once and took it back quietly, a piece at a time, over years of drift, I'm asking you to say this prayer with me, out loud if you can, in your heart if you must, but mean it, every word. Say this: Jesus, I believe you are real. I believe you died for me. I believe you rose again. I have been living as if you didn't exist, or as if you existed but didn't matter, and I am done with that. I am sorry. Forgive me. Come into my life. Come into the broken places, the walled-off places, the places I've never let anyone see. I want to know you, not just know about you. I am yours. All of it, starting now. If you prayed that prayer, if those words came from any real place in you at all, you just made the most important decision of your life, the most important decision of your eternity. Welcome to the family. Welcome home. I want to close with something Jesus said to me, something I saved for the end because I wanted you to hear everything else first. I wanted you to know who I was. I wanted you to know how hard I fought against this. I wanted you to know that I am not a man who came to faith easily or cheaply or sentimentally. I am a man who spent 35 years building the best possible case against God. And then I met Him. And at the very end of our time together, before the light came, before I was pulled back, before pain and fluorescent lights and Amir Patel's hand on my carotid, Jesus said one more thing. He said it quietly, almost gently, the way you say something to someone you love, when you want them to carry it carefully. Tell them I've been waiting, not impatiently. I don't experience time the way they do, but I have been waiting for each of them, specifically, by name, the way you waited for Marcus to come home from school, the way a father waits. Tell them I have been waiting, and I am still waiting, and I will wait until the last possible moment for every last one of them come home. He is waiting for you. Right now, come home.